Hello, my name is nurit basman. I teach at a College of Education in Israel. In my presentation, I will talk about a process of value clarification I performed with college lecturers at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, and about an action research that examined this process. The name of my presentation is Discussing Values During the COVID-19 Period, a Process of Values Clarification with College Lecturers. The current situation in Israel and in most Western countries is a constant devaluation in the practice of values education in teacher training colleges. The prevailing view among policymakers, textbook writers, and other actors in the field of education is that with sufficient technical expertise and mastery of content knowledge, teacher training can be improved. Philosophical and moral issues, which may challenge the prevailing educational perception, are considered irrelevant. During the 1980s, a trend of academization in teacher training institutions has begun. Teacher training has become an academic training that focuses on the scientific disciplinarity of teaching contents rather than on the personal development of the trainees. In parallel with this trend, the perception of education as what Spring calls the human capital model is taking root among educators. According to this perception, education should focus on what brings immediate and measurable benefit and prepares the students for life in a society that will succeed in the competitive global market. The above trends fit into the postmodern trends of meaninglessness and the search for immediate answers. These trends, as well as turning politics into an arena of forceful and manipulative wrestling among strong interest groups, have led to devaluation in the practice of values education in teacher training colleges. There is no doubt then that dealing with values education in teacher training colleges is extremely essential. The difficulties faced by college lecturers with the outbreak of the COVID-19 crisis were found as an opportunity to rethink the nature of values education and its place in teacher training. According to an approach that is still quite prevalent among educators, values education should introduce young people to the valuable things, that is, the values sacred in the educator's culture and the society's accepted behaviors. It should instill in their hearts an attitude of appraisal and admiration for these things and bring them to see them as binding principles of action. In other words, values education shapes the child character in the light of values that have stood the test of time and makes her or him as human as a person should be. I adopt a different conception of values education. I believe that even if one ignores the multiple problems raised by the above-mentioned conception, the accepted conception of values education, is not at all a values education. Adoption of value should be the result of a free and undirected spirit. When a person adopts values through the identification and imitation of external authority. He acts according to values that have been instilled in his mind by people he appreciates, and not according to values that he independently recognizes as valid. His action is guided by judgment of others and not by values. In my opinion, values education should be designed to help students become moral agents. Values education should cultivate in the students the following qualities. First, awareness of their freedom of choice, and desire to exercise it. The second virtue is what Alexander calls moral intelligence. That is the ability and willingness to choose not according to the momentary feelings, but in a reasoned and responsible way, based on a particular perception of good and evil. The third trait is an in-depth knowledge of one's horizons of meaning. That is, the beliefs, rituals, symbols, stories, and meanings of the family and community's tradition to which one belongs himself. The tradition that defines his identity and perceptions of good. The fourth trait is the ability and willingness to constantly interpret, expand and enrich understanding, and change the perception of good immersed in one's tradition. And all this while maintaining a dialogue with different traditions. Gadamer calls it merging horizons. In order to assimilate values education in colleges, it is important first and foremost to formulate optimal ways of conducting values education. This is the main goal of the present research, an action research that examined a value clarification process conducted with lecturers at the College of Education at the beginning of the COVID-19 period. The value clarification process was based on the perception of Alexander of moral agent. The main purpose of the research was then to formulate conditions for an optimal implementation of value clarification process in a college of education. A secondary goal was to uncover values that guide the lecturer's conduct and to initiate rethinking of the college vision. Another aim was to learn about the position of the lecturers regarding the place of values education in teacher training. Following an initial analysis of discussions that took place in lecturers' WhatsApp groups at the beginning of the corona crisis, I emailed 70 lecturers at the college and asked to talk about the ways of dealing with teaching difficulties during this period. I conducted open interviews with the lecturers who responded to my request, a total of 12 lecturers, 9 women and 3 men. They were from different disciplines, different positions in the college, and different years of seniority. In the interviews, I tried to find out together with the lecturers what they had learned from the difficulties they coped with at the beginning of the corona crisis and from how they dealt with them, about the values that guide the professional conduct, about the values that guide the professional conduct. A few days after the personal conversations, 2 focus groups were zoomed in. In one, 6 of the lecturers interviewed participated, and in the other 5, a total of 11 lecturers then. In the focus groups, we looked at the letter the college president sent to the academic staff at the end of the first week of distant teaching, we tried to reveal the values the President expects to guide our conduct in our relationships with students. At the end of the focus groups meetings, participants were sent a questionnaire. In this questionnaire, to which 9 lecturers responded, the lecturer's position regarding the existence of value clarification processes at the college was examined. The questionnaire was also intended to stimulate further observation of the lecturer's moral conceptions. It was found that the lecturers who participate in the process were aware of the freedom of choice and tend to exercise it. The values found to be extremely important to most of them were first caring, which was usually understood by them as listening to the students, and consideration. The second value was professionalism, which was usually interpreted by the lecturers as a commitment for students' learning. The values of honesty and fairness and intercultural encounter were also mentioned by some participants. When participants were asked to justify the values choice, most of them presented an instrumental reasoning. That is, they argued that the value promotes learning. Most participants linked the values to cultural tradition, but only when explicitly asked to do so. Some participants gained insight regarding the values and expanded their meaning. More profound insights have come from lecturers with whom my connections were friendly. Expanding the understanding of values has not been achieved by anyone through dialogue between traditions. My suggestion is that the process of values clarification will include 3 stages. An initial stage of personal conversations that will lead to the development of the virtues freedom, moral intelligence, and horizons of meaning. A second phase of group discussions that will take place, if possible, in culturally heterogeneous groups. Participants will discuss texts that invite a diverse value interpretation and a dialogue between traditions. Such a discourse may lead to further development of the traits mentioned above, and especially contribute to the development of the trait I named merging horizons. At the end of the process, it is recommended to have conversations or to pass a questionnaire that will encourage deepening of insights. My second recommendation for maintaining a successful process of value clarification is that the facilitator will create a non-judgmental climate in the group. A dialogical relationship should be developed with the participants in which the facilitator is present for the participants. I also found that at all stages of the process, the facilitator should encourage open and free dialogue. My last recommendation is to invest deep thought in choosing the text around which the discussion will take place. As part of a value clarification process with college faculty, participants can be consulted regarding the choice of the text. I suggest to consider using authentic documents such as College Vision or Code of Ethics. As part of a value clarification with students, it is worth using a text that presents a moral dilemma. In order to explain how they decide on the dilemma, the participants will have to think not only about the values, but also about the rationale for the choice. At a later stage, it is recommended to discuss texts that express different cultural perceptions of good, in order to stimulate a dialogical discourse between traditions. These were my main recommendations regarding having a value clarification process in teacher training colleges. I thank you for your listening, and I would be happy if you would contact me by email for further discussion.